So you've always kind of fostered a work environment where that was positive, that was encouraging of people.
I mean, we have a philosophy to this day, which is we wouldn't, even if there was a mosquito in the place, we wouldn't kill it. Do you know what I mean? It became a very much about animals and the energy of being very sensitive and gentle with living things. And of course, that's the type of stylist I've got working for me. We're all a bit like a bunch of hippies, very, very fey, like fairies, I mean, the kind of conversation we have in our salon is nothing like a normal hairdressing salon. I don't think anybody's, who works for us could stand working for us if they weren't very sensitive people.
Right.
I'm from a Jewish family, and unlike maybe some Jewish families, I don't believe that family is exclusive. There are cultures where people believe that if you're not their brother, sister, or cousin, uncle, auntie, you're not in it. And if you're not in their religion, you're even less in it. My view was that the whole human world population and all the animals we're here to look after are all part and parcel of the same thing. So as far as I'm concerned, it's all energy. And so, if something awful happens to one of the people who, let's face it, invest their time working with me on my projects, there's a girl behind me who's working at the moment. Something happened in her family life. There was literally no question about whether she should be able to give as much time off as she needed, and properly looked after and everything, because that's the energy that I want to live my life. I look at life as being as time as being art, not money. It's art. It's how well how much excitement you can create in your little old life. And we this afternoon are going to be going back into the lab after we've had our together lunch. And I've got pasta, and we're going to be, which I'm excited about. And we're going
Pasta's
to be going.
Exciting always.
You should see this pasta; it's absolutely gorgeous. I've got the best lunch today. I brought my own. Anyway, and afterwards we're going into the lab, and we've got a whole load of new hair colors to make, which I'm super excited about.
Welcome to Ideology Podcast, Daniel. I'm so glad that we're finally connecting.
Absolutely. Finally.
I'm sorry to interrupt your work day. So you're an early pioneer of organic and mineral hairdressing and the first professional hairdresser to ban animal-tested products from your salons. In the last 3 years, my hair has started to gray. And so I wasn't happy with the process of aging and kind of trying to get to grips with all of that. And then came across your work. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you got started in the hair care business and why you chose to be a hairdresser?
Okay, well, I didn't choose to be a hairdresser at first. The idea of being a hairdresser was abhorrent to me. I wanted to be, I actually was more interested in biochemistry in the beginning. And I actually was always interested in plants, biological plant-based products rather than animal-based products. And I was also interested in cancer treatments. So my plan, if you have a plan when you're 14, 15, 16, I don't think you do really, do you? But I had a plan that I was going to be a chemist working as a biochemist in a laboratory. It didn't work out quite like that, but not far from it. But my first original messing about was at home, mostly in my mum's kitchen, cooking up things, herbal things. And the first invention I ever made did actually get sold. It was called Scalp Clearance Concentrate, and it was a herbal infusion of thyme and sage, which is what my mother used for stuffing the chicken. And I just boiled up this infusion, and having read, some old wives' tale that it was very good for the scalp, for clearing the scalp. Actually, until we mentioned it today, I've forgotten about that. I might have to go back and look at that. But it was meant for me because I had an itchy scalp, flaky scalp, and that was the first invention. But I started making other products because I was quite inspired by that. It did help my scalp actually. And when you're a teenager, that's nothing more embarrassing than this kind of thing. And I worked in as a Saturday boy shampooing hair, where my mother used to have her hair shampooed and set every weekend, every Friday. I worked there as a Saturday boy, just washing hair, and that experience showed me that the products being used in hairdressing were very harsh. Partly because my hands were getting very irritated, between my knuckles when I was shampooing, just in one day. So the girls next to me, boys and girls next to me, they had, bleeding hands because they were there all week, and I was only there Saturday. So it did inflame my hands. And I also noticed that the hair dyes were awfully smelly. That's what really got me. I didn't know how damaging they were, but awfully smelly, and they smelt the whole salon out. So you'd have this perfume salon and this revolting smell of ammonia. So that was my second experiment, to try and find an alternative for the horrible smell of hair dye. And I don't know what I was thinking really, because it wasn't like I even knew how to make the rest of the hair dye, but I was looking for an alkaline alternative to ammonia. And I found one called monoethanolamine. And I actually did manage to license it or sell it to Procter and Gamble a few years later. And it's been used in hair dye ever since. So when you go into a store and you buy a hair dye, it says non-ammonia. That was me.
Wow. And I'm assuming you patented that straight away.
Well, I had an exclusive deal with Procter and Gamble for 5 years. Took me till I was married and had my first baby, paid for everything. So I had a percentage. This was in 1978. In 1986, I resold it to a company in Italy called Antica Herbaristeria, which means ancient herbalist. And they still do make a hair dye called Color Herb, or Herby Tint, Herb Color. And it's sold in health food stores. And that was the first non-ammonia in health food stores. The first non-ammonia sold in the chemist was called Future Tone by Fabergé. And Fabergé, although they make perfumes, they also in those days made hair dye. But that was through Procter and Gamble. They owned it, So it was just under their brand. And then the next one after that was my one, Organic and Mineral Hair Color, which I still sell to this day. That was in 1994. And I've developed new hair colors ever since. The world's first non-ammonia, non-peroxide hair color in a powder, which is called watercolor. It's very famous. I'm always inventing new versions of it. I'm actually was in the laboratory just that second making another version, so I'm always trying to improve, make it less allergenic, that kind of thing.
You mentioned cancer. Is there a link to cancer and the chemicals that are used in normal hair dyes?
People thought that PPD, which is the common allergen, it is a potential sensitizer, which is can cause an allergy. It is actually a rare allergy, but I see it because obviously everyone comes to me for the alternative. Funny enough, it's a bit like working as a doctor specializing in cancer, because you get a sort of skewed view of the numbers, don't you? If all you're dealing with is cancer patients all day, you think everybody's got cancer. And then, of course, an ideal all day with people who've got cancer and allergies. So the question you're asking is are you asking me, does the formula, the common average formulation of hair dye that's on the market cause cancer? I would say no. Pre-1980, which of course I was making products just for a couple of years before that, but my first hair dye, as I say, was probably the first full hair dye was in 1986. So, but before that, before 1980, there were dyes that have shown to cause cancer in animals, and the disease that the particular type of cancer was in those days, which seemed to be more common amongst people that dyed their hair before 1980, was a form of Hodgkinson's disease. Since 1980, there's been a very, very big review of the cancer potential of hair dyes. It's been ongoing, literally, and right to this day, they're still testing and checking and everything. But the most common dye used in hair dye, which is called paraphenylene diamine, so far hasn't got any evidence that it does increase the chances. But there is an interesting thing, which is that there is a slight increase in the number of people diagnosed with breast cancer who do dye their hair. So nobody really knew why. I think I've discovered why, and it's not the PPD.
Right. What is it?
Okay. So when you dye your hair, you're leaving a residue in the hair of nitrogen and amines. Amines are a chemical that's left over, and in itself that wouldn't cause you to have a sort of toxic overload, just those two chemicals. But the cocktail is made into a dangerous substance when you add one other chemical to it, and that chemical is available from the environment itself. So if you go near, say for example, car exhaust fumes, you're going to get another chemical from the exhaust fumes, and that is actually NOx, nitrogen oxide, nitrous oxide, added to the two chemicals that are left over in the hair in the scalp after you've shampooed your hair off, after a color, can produce another chemical, really dangerous chemical called Nitrous amines. And so I believe that the reason why they haven't found the link between hair dye and cancer from the actual chemicals they've been looking at is because they didn't take into account there's that third environmental toxin, which is common. I mean, it's the cause of acid rain. You heard of acid rain?
I've heard of acid rain, but I don't think I know what that is anymore.
Acid rain is two chemicals that come out of exhaust pipes, and there has improved since they put catalytic converters on the back of exhaust pipes on cars and lorries, but it's still, that chemical still comes out. And so sulfurous oxide and nitrous oxide, those are the two chemicals. But the one that I'm concerned about is the nitrogen containing one mixed with the amines. You get N-nitrous amines. And if you look that up on the internet, you'll see that N-nitrous amines are one of the most deadly cancer-causing substances. So I think the reason why there's a slight increase in the number of people who dye their hair who get breast cancer, I think the connection, the link is whether you go near car exhaust fumes or gas barbecues have it, refrigerators, air conditioning units, that kind of thing. It's an exhaust fume, and it definitely produces N-nitrous amines. So that's the link. And that's why the cosmetics people are not finding it, because they're not taking into account what's in the environment for some people. Not everybody lives near a motorway, for example. If you lived in the middle of a field and you were nowhere near any car exhaust fumes or anything like that, very back to nature life, your chances of producing N-nitrous amines on a regular basis are really, really low. But if you lived in London, whereas I used to live in London Bridge, and the car exhaust fumes were unbelievable there. And you mix that with the hair dye, you've got a noxious potential lethal cocktail. I have a solution, by the way, if you want to know. Well, it's a really simple solution. So it's not like everyone needs to swap over to my products. All you have to do is take some vitamin C powder, which you could buy on Amazon, add it to warm water. You only need about half a capful. Run it through, you could actually take the vitamin C and just put it into hair conditioner. You can just add it into your hair conditioner. After you've colored your hair, put it on for a minute, rinse it out. It will literally neutralize all N-nitrous amines. Actually, it will restore the pH of your hair, which is good after a hair dye. It's an antioxidant, so it stops any further oxidization. Simple, effective solution to that particular really serious, potentially serious problem.
Oh my God, I had my hair dyed, I think, a few days ago. And so it's quite scary to think I live in central London. Yeah. Why is
you can buy my detox powder you can get enough for about 6 months for £20. So, and it will make your hair beautiful as well.
Okay, so talk to us about products. What's different about your products, and what kind of shampoos do you have? What kind of hair dyes? So
okay, I understand. So organic and mineral hairdressing is a concept. So it's a concept, or it started off as a philosophy. It started off with, first of all, I find the use of animal ingredients in products, byproducts, disgusting. Some of the things that are used in skincare and hair care, if you actually saw them, you know, how they're produced, you'd throw up. Most of them are slaughterhouse byproducts, and they also subsidize the cheap meat industry. So you might say, for example, oh, I use a product with keratin in it. Yeah. Keratin is boiled horses' hooves.
Right.
So you think, basically everything that you think is like really lovely is really, really revolting.
Yeah, because that's a type of protein that makes our hair stronger.
It is a type of protein, but it came from a horse's hoof. So they don't take hair cuttings from barber shops. They take it from the meat industry, which is much more efficient for them and cheaper. So, but that actually falsely subsidizes meat eating. Now, you know that meat eating and fish eating is very bad for the environment, because, I mean, I don't have to tell you, probably the people listening to this podcast already know this, but when the amount of water and grain that is used for creating meat products would be much better used directly in our stomachs and in our bodies. In other words, we should be drinking the water that the animal drinks, and we should be growing the grain or the plants that we need to feed ourselves. It's a really inefficient way of producing food, and it has terrible environmental consequences. So I don't want to encourage the meat industry by being cheap. I want people to eat less meat and more plants, because that's beneficial to the whole of our society and the future of mankind. Mm-hmm. I'm just using that as an example, that to try to formulate products without any animal ingredients is a challenge, but it's one that I've managed to achieve because that's all I've done. I've stayed focused. And the same with every aspect of my concept of organic and mineral hairdressing. It's all based on the philosophy. And this philosophy is about sustainability, veganism. It's about using as much plant product as possible and as little chemical product, unless the chemicals are not going to have an impact from a mining point of view, and those chemicals are not going to have a toxicity point of view, or they're not going to be environmental pollutants. So, for example, a chemical such as, I don't know, sodium perborate, it's a chemical that was used and has recently been banned because they found it's very bad for the environment. And so that's the thing. Chemicals could be bad for us, but they may not be. They may be just bad for the environment, just as important, obviously. So you have to look at the entire chain. So the whole concept of organic and mineral is that. Now, so imagine little old me, and it's not little old me anymore. There are lots of chemists work for me all over the world. I mean, we've got laboratories everywhere. But in the beginning, it was just little old me in my mother's kitchen. Little old me chucked out into my father's greenhouse because I burnt my mother's pots. Unforgivable, the Le Creuset pots. Unfortunately, I left the Bunsen burner on in my greenhouse. You know what a greenhouse is? Where you grow plants. Yeah. Some people call it.
Where I live, actually.
Yeah. Well, everyone had them in their garden where I lived. Your dad would be out the back there growing plants. Not my dad, but everybody else's dad was. I unfortunately left the Bunsen burner on and then went to relight it the next day. I didn't realize it had gone out, and I set fire to the whole of the greenhouse and then the garage where my dad's Jaguar car. So by the time the fire brigade had come and put it all out, I was then chucked out to a asbestos-proof room where I wasn't allowed to use any naked flames, and I carried on my research in a disused factory somewhere in Wood Green in North London. Didn't have any. I'm pleased to tell you I had no more accidents since then, although it has made me a bit EBGB about it all. Yeah. So that all my products were made by little old me, just sort of like trying to, use my philosophy and adapt it. So my first thing was, I didn't like the smell of hair dye, that. Then the next thing was, I came up with an alternative to put into hair dye to stop the damage. And those two things were the first primary things. Were, is it comfortable and does it damage the hair? If it's comfortable, as in it doesn't smell the whole shop out or your house out, and it doesn't damage the hair, that was kind of like, and it was vegan, then that was kind of my original philosophy. But then it got to the point where I was concerned about toxins. And so then I had to find out about toxins. Now, I told you that my first interest was biochemistry and cancer drugs. It wasn't until I tried that, to live a life, to do that as a job, that I realized that that was a really lonely life in a laboratory with people who wouldn't even stop work when it came to the lunch break. Well, they would stop work, but they'd just open their sandwiches on their lab desk, and nobody used to go into the canteen. And they were the people in the place I worked, they were very, very shy, really. And I had a bit too much personality, maybe, for working in a lab all the time. So that's when I started looking for another job, and I found a job in a cosmetics laboratory where the owner was a friend of a boy I was at school with. He was the uncle, actually, of a boy I was at school with, and he and his family worked there. It was a family business. It was banter. It was fun, and I started making my own range. It was called Organic Hair Company, and he was very supportive of me. And in fact, they owned 49 hairdressing salons, and that's how I got interested in hairdressing, really, apart from the Saturday job, because they asked me, bearing in mind I did have a lot of confidence for someone my age, whether I would help the owner of the salon for a few hours. He had cancer and he wanted help, doing his job for a few hours twice a week. And that's introduced me to working in the salon. I saw for myself how bad bleach was for the hair. That was the first time I'd seen her hair snap off, with bleach, perm lotion causing terrible damage. Got me so excited. I thought, my goodness, there's so many products that need in the hairdressing industry that need sorting out. And I spent the rest of my life, and I have done to this day, trying to take out the toxins, the damage within the vegan philosophy, the sustainable philosophy. And I've had loads of hairdressing salons, and they are the most pleasant environments. In the early 80s, I actually opened my first hairdressing salon just as an investment, and I banned smoking. And I was the first hairdressing salon in the world to ban smoking that I know of. Wow. And all our clients said they'd never come again. They all smoked in those days. All the trainees loved working there because they didn't have to clear up the horrible smelly ashtrays. Mm-hmm. And we just got a different type of clientele. We got a clientele who were a bit more health conscious, people. That smoking had only just been discovered to be cancerous at that time. And I wasn't going to be party to that. And I also didn't like the smell of it. And so we did that. And then, we have a philosophy to this day, which is we wouldn't, even if there was a mosquito in the place, we wouldn't kill it. Do you know what I mean? It became very, very much about animals and the energy of being very sensitive and gentle with living things. And of course, that's the type of stylist I've got working for me. We're all a bit like a bunch of hippies, very, very fey, like fairies, the kind of conversation we have in our salon is nothing like a normal hairdressing salon. I don't think anybody's, who works for us could stand working for us if they weren't very sensitive people.
Right. So you've always kind of fostered a work environment where that was positive, that was encouraging of people and based around, sharing that positive energy.
I'm from a Jewish family, and unlike maybe some Jewish families, I don't believe that family is exclusive. There are cultures where people believe that if you're not their brother, sister, or cousin, uncle, auntie, you're not in it. And if you're not in their religion, you're even less in it. My view was that the whole human world population and all the animals we're here to look after are all part and parcel of the same thing. So as far as I'm concerned, it's all energy. And so, if something awful happens to one of the people who, let's face it, invest their time working with me on my projects, there's a girl behind me who's working at the moment. Something happened in her family life. There was literally no question about whether she should be able to give as much time off as she needed. and properly looked after and everything, because that's the energy that I want to live my life. I look at life as being as time as being art, not money. It's art. It's how well how much excitement you can create in your little old life.
Right.
And we this afternoon are going to be going back into the lab after we've had our together lunch. And I've got pasta, and we're going to be, which I'm excited about. And we're going
Pasta's
to be going.
Exciting always.
You should see this pasta; it's absolutely gorgeous. I've got the best lunch today. I brought my own. Anyway, and afterwards we're going into the lab, and we've got a whole load of new hair colors to make, which I'm super excited about. Number 2, number 7, number 63. Bring it on. I'm just as excited now about inventing and creating and improving as I was when I was that little boy of 14, 15 years old. But it's all about the quality of life and how much excitement you can generate. And if you prevaricate and put things off, because it's too difficult, you don't try, you'll never ever find out whether you could. And everyone who works here is exactly the same. They're all pushing themselves outside their boundaries. Plus, they're also doing boring things as well. I mean, my executive assistant is packing up a box at the moment, just like with, like any old, it's the most boring job in the world. But she also knows that later on she's going to be designing labels, and other things which are more fun and more creative. So, you can't always be exciting, but the whole point is you want to bring as much excitement as you can into your little old life, don't you think?
I completely agree, actually. I kind of think of excitement differently. I remember having jobs where I was doing pretty much what she's doing. Like one of my favorite jobs ever was working like in a hotel. And besides talking to the guests and, the fun parts of working in a hotel, I also liked just kind of putting away these cards that we had to for every guest.
She does as well, actually. Charlotte, the lady who's interviewing me was talking about how much you like getting colored things and putting everything pretty and organized. She loves that as well. I think she finds it very relaxing. Do you remember at school you had girls and boys, but mostly girls, I think, I used to think that most of the girls did this. Not all of them, but were very, very organized, and they had everything color coded, and they even had their pencils color coded, and they even had those ones that smelled, the rubbers that smell perfume and everything. That's Charlotte.
I'm big on stationery.
You're big on that, yeah. She's very big on stationery.
I think it's every job is the social aspect. Actually, it's funny because a lot of the interviews I've done talks about work and what work means for people. So, for example, there was I live in the center of London, and a lot of people now are not really looking forward to going back to the office. And I was really surprised because I thought, oh God, we've been in our houses, we're stuck here. Why would doesn't everyone miss socializing? But I realized not everybody has a work environment that is nurturing, that where you think of your colleagues as your friends, that you can have a laugh with. For a lot of people, it's competition and quite negative at work.
And also, I think the thing is that we live in a culture which I know you're going to be speaking to my son about, aren't you?
Yes.
So, and he about ethical capitalism. My son's an extraordinary visionary, and really understands this whole concept of what we're talking about, and he is Charlotte's boss. So she gets the benefit of all that kind of way of being, and I suppose he is a chip off the old block from me. I would like to think so anyway. But he is extraordinary, and I don't want to talk and rain on his parade, because obviously you're going to have a chance to talk about his vision, which he really does he walks the talk, does Zach. But I mean, not every environment is nurturing, because the society has created a structure where you have workers, and they've created an atmosphere where we all think that however much work you put in is the satisfaction you're going to get out of life. How many times have you heard the old adage, you don't get anywhere in life if you don't work hard?
Yeah, all the time. All the time.
And let me tell you, I'm 63 years old, and I have lived a life from which has gone from really hard work to making work be no different to play. So I've been an artist. I've become an artist of this subject, and my son's the same. My son was just now away in Ibiza. He was there for weeks on end. His businesses were still running beautifully, and he himself was actually able to, I don't imagine there was any clubs going on in the middle of this situation, but he was literally living a life there, working. But it was, what was the difference, between working and playing when you're sitting outside with your, he was building a website for somebody else he's a consultant as well, and he was loving it. Yeah. And yet as a parent, I should have been saying to him, come back and run the business, and what are you doing? You're playing. But in fact, I was joyful that that he can make money. He made thousands of pounds, just having fun. I mean, that's what I meant by excitement, by the way. Some things in life are highly challenging and uncomfortable. Like my bike ride this morning, which was, I had to do 19 miles in 45 minutes. I set myself this triathlon type goal, and it was really, really uncomfortable at times. But when I got to the end of the 19 miles, I looked at my dial and I went, and I've been buzzing ever since.
You're thinking, I'm a triathlete.
I was thinking I'm potentially a triathlete. I got the first bit of the triathlon, the cycling bit. Now I've got to learn how to swim properly. But but the thing is, that's a challenge. So although it was an uncomfortable challenge, it was a kind of stress, which I don't know if you've ever heard of this. You've got the word distress, or you've got another word, which is EU stress. Stress. I haven't heard of that. Yeah, it's Greek, the EU bit, and what it basically means is good stress. The stress that you're experiencing, which is actually pumping you full of endorphins, and it's a fantastic feeling. You're stressed if you're on a mountain bike going flying down a cliff, but it's good stress. It's not the same as your boss telling you that you finished that too quickly.
Job.
Or you finished that too, I can see you finished that job really quickly, so I'm going to give you more work. And I personally love it if the people who work with us can, if they're not enjoying this particular job, either we find them something which they absolutely love, or go home and do something else, because that's not a problem. I'd just rather people were having an enjoyable time, and that as much as possible, that everybody who works with us, and I want the whole world to have a lovely time, if it was possible.
Yeah, I look at every job I've ever stayed at, and it was never about the money for me. I mean, I've had jobs where I was paid so little, and it was really stressful not getting paid enough. But why I stayed was because it was fulfilling in so many other ways. You had great colleagues, you had an understanding manager who was equipping you with skills that you wouldn't get at another job. And I just don't understand why a lot of bosses don't get that. Now, especially, there's such a clash with this, where
especially now with what's happened, yes. But you got to understand, the reason why they don't is because management training hasn't, taught them that. I mean, we've had people work for us who literally could do their work in 1 or 2 hours in a day, and it was so much better than the people that spent 10, 12, 14 hours at work. I have noticed, because I've had hundreds of employees. Can you imagine how many salons I've had? And factories. In some of our factories, we've had 80,000 square feet of factory. So we've got so many people, hundreds of people working on the shop floor, and we noticed that the people who produce the most and offer the most value are the ones that work the least amount of hours. They're the ones that, I actually once looked at all the salons that buy our products, And I realized that there are some, I would say 95% of this particular time, 95% of the customers who gave us the most amount of stress, gave us the least amount of money. And there was about, I think it was 10%, so it was 90. And then 10% of the customers responsible for 90% of the profit. 10% responsible for 90% of the profit. So you have to look and think to yourself, wow, if I got rid of the other 90%, these 10% are really fabulous, really nice, and may make us loads of money. They give us no hassle at all. Why don't we just get rid of the ones that, you know, causing us stress and are, you know, coming, what do they call it, shitting down on us, you know, all the time, and just have the ones we like working with. Wouldn't you rather live your life like that? So that's what I do.
Absolutely. But the thing is, my curiosity is always, what is preventing us from living that way? Is it because we're so focused on money?
Culture. No, it's culture. It's the way our parents have brought us up. You know, you're come on, what did your parents tell you about, you know, what you should do? I mean, when you're 5 years old, you say to your dad, I want to be an astronaut. Yeah. He goes, you can do anything you like. Come back and say you want to be an astronaut when you're 25. And he's going to turn around and go, now be sensible now. That was okay when you were 5, but now you've got responsibility, and you've got to just be sensible here. And of course, that's the kiss of death. My dad actually did once say that to me. He did actually say, you know, I said, oh, I love making hair products. He says, you'll never be L'Oreal. I mean, what's that got to do with it? I didn't even want to be L'Oreal, but you know what I mean? He said that he basically wanted me to be more sensible. The fact that
you even sold your patent to Procter and Gamble, did you ever tell him that?
Yes, but it was fear. You know, he said, "Oh, you did it once. That was lucky." Then I did it. Then I did it with the company in Italy. He says, "Well, you did it twice. That was very lucky." But it won't happen a third time. You can't win the lottery 3 times. I mean, I've invented products ever since. By the way, interesting enough, one of my other children, not Zach, another one called Joshua. Joshua has never worked a day in his life. He's 35 years old. Right. He just composes music. So he's literally has never been to work. He's got a studio wherever he lives. He lives in a hotel at the moment, 5-star hotel in Czech Republic. He's never considered the idea of having a job as being anything worth, you know, relating to him. He would rather live under the arches at Charing Cross than actually get a boring job in McDonald's or, I don't know, working in a pub or something. So as far as he's concerned, if he can't make any money from his gift, which is composing and playing music, that's it. He does not have a plan B. He has no parachute. Yeah.
How do you get to that? You have to.
He never had a job. He never has had one job in his whole entire life. Yeah.
See, that's really completely mind-blowing. Really is. I mean, the idea that you as a dad would also kind of not be anxious for him and just let him live in that and follow his own instincts.
I had no choice. Listen, for all my own fear, when everything I ever told him to do, he went, so kill me. I'm not doing it. I mean, he literally, you know, you can ask Zach about him. He is just literally the most extraordinary. He just doesn't have
I would love to talk to him and find out more, because my daughter's really interested in music and composing music. And
with pleasure. Yeah, with pleasure. I mean, and then that's not to say he doesn't have success. He just doesn't have the word work in his repertoire. He doesn't know when he's at work. Work and play are identical to him.
Yeah.
He says I've
wanted to live like that, and I've pretty much always tried to live like that. I would have to say. So even when I do have to work on a project, I tell myself, you know what, I don't want it to feel like work. So then I'll look at all the things I love about it. Especially if you work with someone that you really get along with, that's easy and you can have a laugh with. You know, that's it. That's life.
Isn't it the same with your friends, though? You've got certain people who just drain you, and you've got certain people who just light you up and you're on fire. Yeah. And I got rid of all the ones that drain me, and I only have a few left, but they're the ones that, you know, inspire me. So, I mean, you know, the
But
same with work.
the thing is, I always worry about that because that's what happens anyway in life. I feel like people do fall away. But the problem is then those people will get to only be around people like them, and their mental health will continue to suffer. And but I don't know anymore. I feel like I used to believe you can save people, but I'm not sure you can anymore.
Well, I think the thing is that we're all connected. So by leaving someone alone who is draining you, believe you me, you're not doing them any favors. You're actually giving them space to discover themselves and their connection to other people who are going to light them up. So if somebody's draining you, you're not doing them a favor.
Yeah, that's true
You're
because it's almost
you're doing them a favor, leaving them.
You're enabling them, right?
I mean, I realized that when I was trying to save people, which I've, you know, obviously I've been guilty of as well, that I didn't realize that I was the wrong man for the job because I found them draining. If I found them inspiring, then they would have been inspired. They would have been, but I found they were draining me. And so that's not going to do them any good. So if you see that we're all connected to each other, that is a very good barometer of when to let go. It's a bit like marriage, isn't it? You know, if you're in a bad marriage, you let go of the marriage and the person ends up married somebody else really happy. You end up perhaps married somebody else really happy. You did themselves both a favor. We make these commitments to work and to the system of school, to the savings, the pensions. You know, what is the point of working in a job which doesn't inspire you just for the fact that you think you're going to be able to save enough money to live 30 years on the money that you earn, and you're not going to. It's almost impossible to actually achieve it. The fact is, we live too long now for the concept of saving for a pension and then retiring. And also, life is too short because loads of people die before that or die shortly afterwards. So my theory is there's no such thing as retirement. There's literally no reason to go without. Enjoy your life right now. It will all take care of itself. But you know, when we're talking about products,
yes, please.
So I've adopted the organic and mineral hairdressing concept, which, you know, I'd like to believe I'm the pioneer of, has extended itself to cancer patients as well, because I look after cancer patients for all the hair and skin side effects that they get from the drugs. Can you imagine? I do that 15 hours a week. I do free consultations on people with allergies, hair loss, and cancer. And anyone who wants to color their hair at home, that kind of thing, or they want a hair care advice. Worldwide, I do this using this microphone, 15 hours a week. To be honest, it's a bit more than that, because on the Saturday and the Sunday afternoon, I do them as well because I love it. I'm supposed to be asleep, having a little rest, but I actually do it for a few hours as well then. But that's because I love it. I don't charge anything. I don't care if they buy anything. It's not for that reason. It's a passion
Yeah,
project.
you did that with me, didn't you? Where
I did.
It was really funny actually, because I thought about it after I hung up and how completely you could have taken offense, a couple of times. I was just saying, I don't know what's happened to my hair. I used to have very thick afro hair. Now I have Caucasian hair. And I was telling a friend of mine, I said, I called him and I was quite emotional about my hair. And he said, oh yeah, really? You mean Caucasian hair that looks quite lifeless?
Maybe, yeah. The thing is that I'm being myself, and you're being yourself. Yeah. And that doesn't mean to say we're always going to agree with each other and we're not going to make comments that are going to piss each other off. It doesn't matter though, does it? The truth is we're both coming at it with a good heart. Yeah. My intention is to hold the space for you, to try to give you a benefit of my expertise, and also to let you speak and let you talk and give you that time to feel heard. And that's the whole point of being a human being, isn't it? So with those 15 hours, that's a passion project. I don't consider it an indulgence. I consider it something that I can afford to do because that I'm successful enough to be able to give back 15 hours at least a week to other people. So it's a privilege.
People can call you if they're having hair loss, if they're having issues with their hair.
Actually,
so first of all, I wanted to ask you, why do you think hair is such an important identity marker for us?
Well, I lost my hair actually with COVID. So I've had two experiences where I've lost my hair. and fortunately managed to get it to go back. So I can answer that very succinctly, I think, from my own personal point of view. You just said it, actually. Why is it our identity is wrapped up in our hair? Isn't the persona, the mask? I don't know if you know the word persona actually comes from the actual Italian for a mask. You know, where they had the Viennese balls, not Venetian balls, where they walk, you know, around with the mask. That's where the word persona comes from. We all, from a very young age, are developing a persona, or a series of personas in the case of people with multiple personality disorder. But we are all playing a role. I mean, I've been out with girls who appeared to be women who were the most strict, librarian, serious people, but you know, they weren't. They were absolutely, underneath the mask, they were absolutely unrepressed, crazy girls. And so, you know, it was like shocking. I said, you know, and I've actually asked them, what is it about how you are in public to how you are in private? They say, well, you've got to play the game, because this is how people want you to present yourself, and otherwise people won't like you. And then in private, I can be myself. You know, how many people do you know who've had a few drinks and suddenly,
oh yeah,
the real them comes out. So I think hair is part of the identity that we're used to presenting to the public. And it always amazes me how people are prepared to wear a wig to preserve that identity, that sense of identity that other people will see them as being a certain way. There are people, cancer patients particularly, who lose all their hair, and they've come back to me and said, you do not know how released I feel, that I can not worry about my looks. I now feel like I've grown into a person who doesn't have to hide behind my looks. And I can tell you, having lost my hair twice, it's extremely difficult. But I actually was able to accept that, you know, I had no hair, not much. Once I had no hair, and the other time I had 50% of the hair I've got. And obviously you can see my hair is quite defining for my age, 63. Yeah. It's quite amazing. So it was a big deal. Obviously, for all my life, people have said, can I put my hands through your hair? You know, I've had my friends' mothers even say it to me. So, you know, much to their annoyance, especially in later years when they've got no hair. So, yeah, it's a big deal. But isn't it a wonderful thing if you can transcend that? Now, that's not me judging people. So when I actually say to people, let me help you with your hair loss, or, you know, coloring your hair because you've got an allergy and you can't color it at the moment without my help, I'm not pandering to that old adage that we should all look a certain way. You know, I've got loads of people that said to me, you know, I've gone grey, I'm allergic to hair dye, should I bother looking for an alternative? And I've said, do you like your hair grey? And they've said, I do, but, you know, I don't want people to think I'm getting old. And I've said, well, you know, why don't you embrace it and let's try it and see whether you can love it. Lots of things have happened to people, particularly cancer patients who've lost all their hair. They've ended up with very short hair. So many thousands. I mean, I've dealt with 500 a year at least who've kept their hair really short, who used to have, you know, hair right down to their bottoms, who would never have dreamt about having their hair cut. But they've said it's freed them up, you know. So I think that the answer, the quick answer, the long answer to the short answer to a long question. Yeah. Now, what I really should have said is that it's not for anyone to judge anyone where they're at, you know, in the stage of their identity. But I can tell people, if you're ever forced to do anything, like let's say you have a heart attack and the doctor says you're only allowed to do 2 hours work a week from now on. Human beings are that amazing that you can take someone who was working 80 hours a week or 60 hours a week, and he can be just as successful on 2 hours if he has to, because he obviously values his time much more and he works more smartly. It's the same with when you're forced to lose your hair through cancer treatment or whatever, or hair dye allergy, and you don't know me, and you're in that situation, you can get used to anything. So it's an indulgence to hide behind your own identity, but it's also not freeing you up, it's holding you as a prisoner.
Mm.
So it would be lovely, wouldn't it? Be lovely to be able to decide whether you want to color your grays, whether you don't, whether you want to shave your head for a change, or you want to have long hair. How wonderful you can have such confidence in your own identity to be able to embrace change without fear of worrying about people judging you.
Yeah. I think I've always been conscious of that from a very early age. I think that comes from my parents, you know, who are constantly saying, don't think of your looks as who you are. You know, it's a Sufi principle, and Sufi Islam emphasizes the inner life and the outer life. But it's still really hard because you still live in a world that's still very much externally driven. So for me, what I've always done is kind of always understood that I'm going to get older. I will not look the same. Change is a part of life. But even with all of that, it's been really hard to kind of accept that my big afro curls are not, because I think just in the last year, thinking about what that meant to me, that it was tied to my ethnicity, it's just been, I'm surprised by the fact that I wasn't prepared for any level of attachment, because I thought I was not very attached. And so that when I found out that I actually do wish I could have that aspect of my identity intact for as long as I live, that really surprised me, you know? Yeah.
Well, everything's a journey, and you're in the middle of the transition from acceptance, and that's what whole of life is like. You know, I never thought that, you know, my mother would die when she did. I was very young. I never knew my nephew would die when he was 9 years old. I never knew a lot of things. But the thing is that the whole point of life is you go through a period of grief, in the case of afro hair, losing it, and then you'll go on to the next stage of embracing whatever is. And this is the whole point of life. It's, you know, what else is there in life other than moving through the journey? And you know, the truth is, you don't know what you've got until you lose it, but that's not the end of it. You know, that's the next thing. And it's all about gratitude, isn't it? Gratitude for what is rather than what was. Or you can even be grateful for what was if you want. It's a choice. You know, I think that there aren't very many tenets that we need to live by, which would serve us well. Compassion for each other, and the whole of the energetic force of life has got to be one of the biggest, the most important things, feeling connected, and also feeling gratitude, you know, for gratitude for what is rather than gratitude for what was. Well, rather than what, you know, you don't want to ever be sitting there thinking, feeling ungrateful. You did have afro hair, you loved it, or you didn't love it. Now you wish you had it, but then now you can love having straight hair.
Yeah, well, that's
unusual.
That's why I'm kind of glad that I grew up, you know, aware that no real identity is permanent, and to kind of have this way of thinking of the world as, yeah, you come from one place, but who knows where life will take you. And I try.
Well, you know, it'll be somewhere different from where you started.
Yeah.